I usually use a rule of 3. If we're interacting and you do something that I find disruptive, I'll note it. And then if you do it again, I think, oh yeah, that probably wasn't merely situational. But if you do it a third time, then I'll say, hey, I just noticed this. And you'll say, no, that didn't happen. And I'll say, yeah, not only did it happen, but it happened here and it happened here, and I'm not making this up. And then they'll come up with a bunch of objections about why that isn't necessary, and you push those aside, and they'll come up with a few more objections, and they'll push those aside, and then usually they'll get mad or burst into tears, and if you push that aside, then you get to have a conversation. People don't do that. They won't do that. And so they don't solve the problems, and so then the problems accrue, right? And if they accrue over 15 years of a relationship, then they end up fat, ugly, and in divorce court. You got to be a monster, because first of all, you need 6 arguments about why their objections aren't going to stop you, and then you have to not be intimidated by the anger, and you have to not be swamped by compassion about the tears. There's something going on at your workplace, and you need to object to it because it's driving you crazy, and you talk it over with your wife so that you've got your head screwed on straight. You say, oh, I've got to say something. And you go there and you say something, and you're stumbling and awkward and all of that. But you watch the response. You've learned, well, I'm not as coherent as I could be. I'm not as good at putting my arguments together. My boss is more of a son of than he thought he was. This is a worse problem than I knew about. It's like differentiated. Don't lose an opportunity to grapple with something that objects to you, especially when the objection is rather small. You cannot help someone who hasn't decided that they want things to be better. Unless they make the decision that they want to make things better, forget it. You're wasting your time, and all it will do is hurt you. So the person has to step forward, in a sense, and say, well, there's something not right about the way things are going for me, and it could be better. And someone else might be able to help me figure that out. Lots of times when people are talking, what they're trying to do is to impose their viewpoint on another person. I'm right and you're wrong, and I'm just going to hack at you until you shut up or you agree. Really, you'll never agree, because you just don't get someone to agree that way. It's not possible. But you might be able to cow them into silence or anger. A therapeutic conversation, which is a genuine conversation, is one in which both the people in the conversation are oriented towards a higher state of being while they're conversing. If the conversation isn't engaging, then that's a sign that you're not having a conversation. And that's a really useful thing to know too. If you're talking to someone and they're not listening, shut up. Just stop. It's like you could tell if they're not listening. And if they're not listening, quit saying words. If they're not listening, that's a sign that the situation isn't set up to allow you to progress on the path that you're choosing. And so then you have to stop and you think, okay, well, what's going on here? Why is the person not listening? That's when you have to wake up past what it is that you're trying to impose on the situation and explore and see what's there. And that's way more interesting than trying to impose your viewpoint. But it's very interesting to talk to people who radically differ, because they'll tell you things that you haven't considered. That doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but it's much more informative to walk away from a conversation having learned something that you didn't know, and that's especially the case when you're dealing with people who are close to you that you will have around for the rest of your life. You cannot win an argument with them. Because all that will happen is if you win, they'll get you back. They'll get resentful, and then they won't be helpful. You just can't win an argument with someone that you will have repeated contact with. What you can do, however, is you can have a conversation. What is it that I would have to do, because we're having this argument, what would I have to do in order to satisfy you? The other person has to think, okay, what are the conditions for my satisfaction? So maybe, your partner says, you're not paying enough attention to me. It's like, all right, what do you want? Exactly. Do you want me to act differently when I come home and I'm at the door? It's like, you're feeling unattended to. What do you want? Well, then they'll say, well, if you love me, you should be able to figure that out. So the other person, unless they want to corner you into just being the kind of loser who can't figure things out, which is why are they with you then, they need to think about that. It's like, what is it that I want from this person? What would constitute more attention? You have to allow your partner to be a moron, because of course they are. And so once you tell them what you want, you have to let them do it badly like 10 times, because they're never going to do it right the first time. One of the things I often recommend is that they go on a date. You know, they take each other away from their home where the kids are. Of course, first of all, they tell me they don't want to do that. It's stupid. It's like, it isn't, by the way. It's not stupid. It's like, oh, you don't want to go out and have an enjoyable time with your partner. You think your relationship's going to survive when all you do is snipe at each other and do horrible things. And then they go and it's like, it's just miserable, right? Like one person says something to the other that immediately sets them off when they're out on the date because they're kind of mad about going anyways. And then they come back and go, well, that just didn't work and we're never going to do it again. People don't think about it, you know? It's like, so maybe when you take your partner out and you haven't been getting along, it takes you like 10 times before you have a relatively okay time. If you practice 10 times, then you might be able to have 740 good times out together. You know, and that's an underestimate. So 10 times of practicing is hardly a problem for that kind of return. Following this path is all part of this Rogerian process of listening. And listening is trying to figure out what the hell the other person is telling you. And understanding at the same time that they don't know. You could corner them by saying, well, you want to be attended to more, what do you want? And they'll try some weird defense like I told you already. Like, if you love me, you'd already know, which is a cliche. And it's a foolish cliche, so you can't let that stop you.
There have been psychologists who've done empirical investigations into what predicts the longevity of a relationship. And the data show that if the relationship interactions fall below 5 positive to 1 negative, then the relationship deteriorates and is generally doomed. We're wired so that negative interactions hurt us more than positive interactions help us if they are of the same magnitude. So, for example, people will work harder to avoid a loss of $5 than they will to attain a gain of $5. Interestingly enough, if the interactions rise so that they exceed 11 positive to 1 negative, the relationship also deteriorates. You want a fair bit of positive emotion and reflection from your partner, but you don't want them to be a naive, dependent pushover who's afraid to stand up for themselves. Watch the people around you, and whenever they do anything that you would like to see repeated on a regular basis, tell them exactly what they did in detail. Just indicate that you noticed. If the envious part of you isn't jealous of the revelation of the goodness of the person, wait till your wife dresses herself up in a particularly attractive manner, and then either fail to notice by occupying yourself with something trivial while she's attempting to gain your attention, or by criticizing her directly. You can be sure that she'll never reveal her attractiveness to anyone else for the rest of her life, including you, and you'll get exactly what you deserved. So that's the opposite of watching people carefully. What do you want in your house? How about peace, tranquility, happiness, and humor? Then you can watch and see, well, when is this manifesting itself in the people around me?